Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, hockey fans. It is a brisk little 3 degrees Celsius, 38 degrees Fahrenheit, in a Bridgewater, Nova Scotia that doesn't really know what it wants to be when it grows up today, weather-wise. My name is Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and welcome to the Monday, April 18th edition of the Bridgewater's Finest 2016 NHL Playoffs podcast. Now, today marks a full 1 week since we started doing this podcast. We started on Monday of last week, and I just wanted to take a second. Again, I'm going to get all sappy and emotional and lovey-dovey with you guys, because you guys are the ones that are really making this happen if you think about it. In the first week of this podcast, our 7 videos have registered over 700 views, over 100 views a video, just barely, but over 100 a video, and over 100 hours of listening time. So you guys have spent a combined 100 hours in the last week listening to me talk about hockey. And I think that's kind of incredible. I think that's kind of awesome. And I want to take a second to thank you guys one more time. Like, I think I've done every video, but I want to take just a little extra time at the beginning of this video to say thank you so much. The response has been excellent. I'm having a lot of fun doing this, and we're going to keep this going straight through until someone hoists Lord Stanley's Cup. We had 4 games on the go last night, and if 2 days ago the theme of the day was weird goals, like the weirdest goals you'll ever possibly see, I think the theme of yesterday was probably special teams. Special teams and really, really bad penalties. I figure that was probably the theme for the games last night, and we will get into talking about them right now. We're going to start with the first game, the St. Louis Blues in Chicago, taking on the Blackhawks. Chelsea Dagger in full effect in Chicago. This was game 3 of this series. The series tied at 1 game apiece. St. Louis goes into Chicago, wins this game 3-2 to take a 2-1 series lead. Shots in this game were 46-36 in favor of the hometown Blackhawks. St. Louis, I felt, definitely had the better part of the play in the early first period here. Things got kind of chippy. Brodziak and Svedberg each went off for getting in a little cuddle puddle with each other behind the net. St. Louis taking the extra 2-minute penalty there. And what do you know? You take a bad penalty, and it ends up coming back on you. I said before this game, when I previewed this game on the podcast 2 days ago, I talked about in a series that this is this close, special teams could end up being the difference. 2 minutes and 18 seconds into the first period, Chicago on the power play, Brent Seabrook with a one-timer off of a really good cycle by the Blackhawks. Assists go to Taves and Kane, and wouldn't you know it, on the power play, it's 1-0 Chicago. Jay Bouwmeester had himself a bad little series there. He takes a hooking penalty, he's in the box for 2 minutes, then he takes an interference penalty because he plays the puck while he's still standing in the penalty box. Now, this happened earlier in this series, and it did not get called. It did get called earlier this season, as they mentioned on the broadcast. Patrick Kane got called for this same penalty earlier in the season. So you can't do that. You got to get back on the ice. You got to get back in the play. Blues, for their part, doing a great job getting down and blocking some Blackhawks shots. 10 shot blocks in the first period. The Blues are also dominating the face-off circle in the first period. It was well over 60%. So Blues doing really well in the face-off dot against some good face-off centers in Chicago. You win those face-offs, you control those pucks. First period was a very physical one. 28 hits combined between the two teams. Svedberg gets in more penalty trouble, high-sticking Vladimir Tarasenko, and what did I say? 12 minutes and 11 seconds into the first period, St. Louis ties this game. Colton Parayko, St. Albert, Alberta's own, gets his first goal of these playoffs. Assists go to Pietrangelo and Fabry, and it really looked like a carbon copy, really, of the Brent Seabrook goal. It was the exact same thing. Off the cycle, one-timer from the point, finds its way home. It did get tipped by a Chicago stick. I believe it might have even been Seabrook's, but now I can't remember. So it goes in off of a Chicago stick, but St. Louis has tied the game. First period winding down, Brian Elliott makes an excellent save on Duncan Keith with only 2 seconds left in the first. That would have been such a huge momentum swing for the Blackhawks, but we are still tied. Early in the second period, big scramble in front of Brian Elliott's net, multiple saves, multiple blocked shots, but the puck does eventually find its way in. 1:04 into the second period, Chicago retakes the lead. It's Artem Anisimov with his first of the playoffs. Panarin gets the assist. A turnover sent into the slot. Anisimov just kind of sends a little floater. He wanted to get a lot more on it than he did, but it trickles up and over Brian Elliott. You'll take them any way they come. Anisimov puts the Blackhawks back up 2-1. Now, with a 2-1 lead in a close game, what do you need? You need awesome goaltending, and Corey Crawford makes arguably the save of the playoffs. Berglund coming down the wing, he dishes off to Laterra, and Crawford comes across crease with the glove. Just an unbelievable save. I think it's up there with, it was another save that was, well, actually the Steve Mason save. I think it's up there in terms of, those two kind of fighting it out for the save of the playoffs, but I think I give the edge to Crawford here, because just an excellent glove save by Crawford to keep his team out front. Second period drags on. Now we got a huge scramble in front of Crawford, and he makes a couple more just excellent saves to keep his team out front. And you're starting to feel like, oh man, Crawford's got it tonight. I'm not sure. I don't think St. Louis is going to beat him again. So things are looking good for the hometown Hawks. Scotty Upshall slew-footing Andrew Shaw, which I feel like it was drawn. There was a little bit of, I give him a 6 because he was a little weak on the dismount kind of thing. But if you're Scotty Upshall, you can't do that. Like, you have to know better. You have to know better than something like that. He's looking right at you. He's trying to draw this penalty. Chicago goes back to the power play. No damage. The Blues kill it off. 37 total shots in the second period. All offense in the second period. 24 of them coming from Chicago sticks. Brian Elliott making a huge save late second period. Artemi Panarin coming in with a deke in the late second period. Elliott makes the big save. We move to the third period. Chicago has essentially drawn even in terms of face-offs, which means now they're turning around and they're starting to dominate the face-off circle. You got back and forth third. You got chances on both sides. 5 minutes and 15 seconds. One of these St. Louis chances ends up in the back of the net. St. Louis ties the game at Patrick Berglund with his first of the playoffs. Assists go to Shattenkirk and Fabry, and really it was one of those situations where you just throw it on net. You just throw it on net, it takes a bounce off of one of the Chicago defenders, again, hits the ice, and then bounces up and basically winds up in the top corner. So Crawford had very little chance on that one other than pure dumb luck. Didn't work out that way. 5:15 into the third, we got a tie game teeing up the last 3/4 of this last period. And the turning point of the game, Patrick Kane takes a double minor for high sticking, draws some blood, and what did I say about the friggin' power plays? 13 minutes, 22 seconds into the third period. St. Louis on the power play. Jaden Schwartz gets his first of these playoffs. Backes puts the puck into the slot. Nice little tic-tac-toe play with Backes and Tarasenko. Schwartz puts it home. St. Louis has the lead. Chicago does a great job killing off the last half of that double minor penalty. They actually get 2 really solid shorthanded chances. Nothing ends up coming from those. The Blackhawks pull Crawford with 1.5 minutes left in the third period. St. Louis holds the fort, and they win it 3-2. St. Louis takes a 2-1 lead on Chicago's home ice. They wrestle home ice away from Chicago the same way that Chicago wrestled it away from St. Louis. So, again, this is going to be a back-and-forth series. This series is going 7. I just feel it in my bones. It's going to be really fun going forward. Next, let's go to the Motor City with Tampa Bay in Detroit taking on the Red Wings, up 2-0 in this series. The big note from this game is the change in the Red Wings goal. As I mentioned, they could do. Peter Mrazek gets the start for Detroit over Jimmy Howard. And what do you know? It's almost like they should have started Mrazek to begin with. In Game 3, Detroit shuts out Tampa Bay 2-0 to get themselves back in this series. Shots in this game were 30-16 in favor of Detroit. The Red Wings playing a great whole team defensive game. Another physical start to what's been a very physical and chippy series. Brendan Smith absolutely plastering Cedric Paquette in the corner. Maybe borderline hit, but you know what? They all count. The undisciplined play, however, in this series kind of continuing. And again, we're talking about penalties. But it's not just penalties, it's also lack of discipline. Coburn and Helm. Coburn takes a tripping penalty. Helm gets called for embellishment because he should have gotten called for embellishment on that. So, I mean, again, the lack of discipline, it's kind of hard to watch for me as a hockey fan. I don't know. I guess I like skill hockey. And when I see teams just making, and I understand that the pressure is a lot higher in the playoffs, but when I see teams making kind of these dumb mistakes, I don't know, it bothers me. Detroit's best chance, Sheehan is sent in on a partial breakaway, a nice little deke, but he is stopped by Ben Bishop, who looked super calm in this game. Looked like the goaltender that we all know Ben Bishop is, especially one that is up 2-0 in a series. Now, more penalty trouble. The Lightning take 2 bad penalties straight back-to-back, and the Wings are going to be sent on a 5-on-3 power play. Now, I've watched a lot of hockey in my day. This was probably the worst 5-on-3 power play I've ever seen in my life. When you're on a 5-on-3, and you can barely gain the opponent zone, and you're cycling a little bit, but you know what this looked like? This looked like a Montreal Canadiens power play. And I watch their power play and I pull my hair out because they get so fancy and cute with the puck. And that was exactly what the Red Wings were doing. It's a 5-on-3. You got Ben Bishop in net. Throw the puck at the net. Wear him out because you're going to need it later in the game. But generate some shots. This was, without a doubt, the worst 5-on-3 power play I've ever seen in a hockey game that meant as much as this one meant. But in any case, again, Lightning continue. They keep taking bad penalties. The Wings are not generating a ton until they do. 12 minutes and 42 seconds into the second period, we open the scoring in our game. Detroit is on the board, and I'm going to try to pronounce this as best I can. Athanasiou, I believe is how you pronounce that. His first career playoff goal coming from Tatar and Anderson. A nice little slapper from Athanasiou. It is 1-0 Detroit. The crowd was kind of down. They were kind of quiet. That got them back into it in a big, bad way. Detroit's on the board. They've got the lead. Rather than seeing the big pushback that we're sort of used to seeing in these playoffs coming from the team that just got scored on, the Wings were actually kind of bolstered by this opening goal. They started skating, they were pressing harder, they were throwing the body, and less than 5 minutes later, they get rewarded for it. Henrik Zetterberg doubles the lead off of a scramble in front of Ben Bishop. He kicks it sort of towards the net, which hits the post. Then he gets it with his stick, tucks it in. Zetterberg with the goal. Detroit leads 2-0 on an unassisted goal. Zetterberg unfortunately follows that up by taking an interference penalty late in the second period. That bleeds into the third. The penalties continue into the third. Again, this is one of the most undisciplined hockey games I think maybe I've ever seen. You had multiple 4-on-4s back-to-back. At one point, I believe there was a 4-on-3. And during the 4-on-3, a penalty got taken. So there was a chance that it was going to be a 3-on-3. It's just one team has got to look at themselves and say, these guys are giving us penalties, gift-wrapped. Can we stop taking so many? Because then we're going to get more chances. We're going to keep control in this thing. The Wings start applying some pressure, middle of the third period, 6 straight shot attempts, trying to extend that lead, thinking, look at this top line, look at how good this Tampa Bay top line has been with Kucherov and Johnson. We may need one more. So the Wings start applying pressure. And the blasted penalties. More penalties, more penalties. This thing felt like both of these teams just went to an episode of Oprah, and Oprah standing there going, you get a penalty, and you get a penalty, and you get a penalty. Everybody gets a penalty, because literally, even Pavel friggin' Datsyuk gets a penalty. The guy that's probably the most sportsmanlike player in this generation of hockey. Even Pavel Datsyuk gets a penalty. You know when Datsyuk gets a penalty, there's a problem. Lightning start their pushback middle of the third period, and their pushback dies with, you guessed it, a late penalty. There's a huge scrum at the end of this game, as you would expect with this series, the way this series has gone. And one more time, 4 penalties are given out at 20 minutes of the third period. So really, what's the point? But in any case, 4 more penalties assessed at 20 minutes. Peter Mrazek, for the third time in his very brief playoff career, shuts out the Tampa Bay Lightning. That's a nice little feather in your cap moving forward. Peter Mrazek is the guy. Sorry, Jimmy Howard, but you just didn't get it done. 8 goals against in 2 games. That's not going to do it. Peter Mrazek is the guy moving forward. He gets the shutout. Detroit is back in this series with a 2-0 victory. Lightning now lead the series 2-1. Let's go to the island now, where the New York Islanders are hosting the Florida Panthers for the first ever playoff game in the Barclays Center. Game 3 of this series, knotted up at 1 game apiece. The Islanders come from behind and win this game 4-3 in overtime. A huge win. The Barclays Center crowd going nuts. A great game for the Islanders. Really a bit of a collapse here for the Panthers and Roberto Luongo specifically. This is his second quote-unquote bad game in this 3-game series. There are question marks there for Bobby Lou. Shots in this game were 39 shots apiece. The Islanders now lead the series 2-1. Interesting to me to see the Islanders' skill players, guys like Tavares and Okposo. They were the ones that were coming out hitting early in this game, maybe trying to set the tone for their team, first ever playoff game in the new building. Alex Petrovic takes a hit from Matt Martin in order to make a play. He sends the puck towards the net, takes a big hit. 2 minutes and 25 seconds into the first period, the Panthers get on the board, and guess who? Riley Smith, with his 4th goal of the playoffs already, 4 goals in 2 games and 2 minutes and 25 seconds. So he's having himself a pretty good playoff. Petrovic and Matheson with the assists there. He picks up the rebound off the Petrovic point shot. It is 1-0 Florida. The Islanders continue their physical play, trying to send a message in their new home building. 8 consecutive hits after that 1-0 goal. Both teams now kind of starting to get into a little bit of penalty trouble. Couple of offsetting penalties there, roughing penalty going one way. Thomas Greiss opening up the second period with a huge save on red-hot Riley Smith. He almost had his 5th, but a minute and 11 seconds into the second period, again, we had a lot of early scoring in this series. Just buckle down those first 5 minutes, but, a lot of early scoring in this series. A minute and 11 into the second, Florida doubles their lead. It's Alex Barkov from Smith and Huberdeau. Barkov picking up a rebound off the boards, and it is 2-0 Florida. This game is going south for the hometown Islanders. After the 2-0 goal, this game kind of starts turning into a bit of a track meet. Both teams are generating chances. The Isles still keeping up with the physicality in this one. They badly out-hit the Panthers in this game one more time. But the Panthers kind of start getting a little bit sloppy. Well, first of all, they score a goal to make it 3-0. There's another lengthy review, and the goal gets called back one more time. I would rather have the right call be made than just just go with it for the sake of the speed of the game, especially in the playoffs. Every goal is magnified, so you want to make sure the right call is on the ice out there. And most of you kind of agreed with me when I asked you guys about it in the comments section of a previous video. The Panthers start getting a little sloppy. 5 minutes and 21 seconds into the second period. Islanders on the power play, and it's Pulock with his first of the playoffs from Okposo and Tavares, a one-timer, Okposo to Pulock. It goes in. We got ourselves a brand new hockey game here. It's 2-1 Panthers. But just barely over 2 minutes later, the Panthers restore the 2-goal lead. It's Nick Bjugstad. His second goal of these playoffs comes from, crash the net, put the puck on net, crash the net, good things happen. Bjugstad from Smith and Kulikov. Riley Smith can't stop scoring points. Smith and Kulikov again with the assists. Bjugstad puts the Panthers up 3-1. The Islanders start a mad pushback at this point. They do not want to lose this game in front of the hometown fans. A big pushback. They're swarming the Panthers' net. They're getting lots of chances. 11:48 into the second period. The Islanders pull back within one. Prince with his first of these playoffs from Pulock and Dahan. A centering pass, and Prince puts it home. The Islanders now only down 3-2. Goes back and forth, a pendulum, back and forth and back and forth. Both of these teams having their chances. Dmitry Kulikov gets called, takes a penalty. You know where we're going with this. 16:55 into the second period. Islanders on the power play. It's Franz Nielsen tucking a backhander behind Luongo. Tavares and Okposo with the assists there. And all of a sudden, we've got a tie game, and that goal that got called back, that is now huge because this game is tied. Casey Cizikas takes a late tripping penalty in the second period on Riley Smith. Now he's just Nazem Kadri. Now he's drawing penalties too. This guy is the MVP so far. It's silly to talk. It's way too early to talk about MVPs. And no disrespect to Tyler Johnson and Nikita Kucherov, who have basically dominated their series. But Riley Smith is definitely the playoff MVP at this point, because now he's even drawing penalties to put his team on the power play. That bleeds over into the third period. Very physical opening to the third period. 11 hits registered in the first 4 minutes, 2 of them on Casey Cizikas. But quite frankly, the third period, there's very little edge one way or the other. There's really not a whole heck of a lot to talk about in this third period. This game is heading to overtime. Midway through the overtime period, Roberto Luongo makes a huge kind of reactionary save, but very shortly after that, 12:31 into the overtime period, the New York Islanders win the game on home ice in overtime. It's Hickey with his first of these playoffs from assists from 2 much maligned Islanders players so far in these playoffs, Brock Nelson and Josh Bailey. They center the puck out front, does Brock Nelson. Hickey finds it, puts it behind Luongo, who looked like he might have either been mucking with his equipment or maybe was having neck spasms or something like that. He said after the game, he said he was exhausted. 3 games in 4 nights. I can understand why. But the Islanders get the goal, 12:31 into overtime. Islanders win the game in front of the hometown faithful to take a 2-1 series lead. And our final game sees the Nashville Predators in Anaheim for Game 2 of their series with the Ducks. Nashville with a bit of a surprising victory in Game 1 to take home ice away from Anaheim. But I mean, come on. Nashville's not going to beat Anaheim twice on their home ice, right? Wrong. Nashville wins both games in Anaheim, winning Game 2 3-2 against the hometown Ducks. The Ducks did have the edge in the shot category, 28-27. Nashville now takes a 2-0 series lead. The Preds, for their part, definitely getting the better part of the early play in this game. More hits, more chances. They're definitely getting the better of it early. Pekka Rinne does have to turn away Rickard Rakell on 2 excellent scoring chances, though, midway through the first period. Corey Perry takes a hooking penalty against Philip Forsberg. John Gibson forced to make a big save, the second straight game that he's made a big save on a Shea Weber slap shot. He gets the better of him for the second game in a row. Corey Perry proceeds to take another penalty because one penalty is never enough, and then Getzlaf joins him in the box soon after. Remember when I said that Getzlaf and Perry needed to be better in this series? I didn't mean that they needed to be better than the other one at taking penalties. Not what I meant. 14:20 into the first period, however, Anaheim does get on the board. It's Andrew Cogliano with a nifty little backhander on the breakaway unassisted. Cogliano was playing a big role in this Ducks offense. He was looking really, really good in this game, and Cogliano gets Anaheim on the board, 1-0. Very evenly matched game, though, and 19:04 into the first period, last minute of the first period, Nashville equalizes. It's Ekholm from Wilson and Smith. Wilson putting the puck into the slot. A nice little backhander from Ekholm finds its way home. Nashville has tied the game heading into the second. Second period stays very physical between these two teams. Both teams generating opportunities. off of their physicality, and halfway through the second period, Nashville takes the lead. It's Craig Smith at 9 minutes and 55 seconds of the second period from Forsberg and Roman Josi. Forsberg centering the puck into the slot. Smith snipes it home. Nashville now has the lead 2-1. After the 2-1 goal, I have to say I was really surprised and really impressed by the way that Anaheim possessed the puck and applied pressure. It was some of the best from them that I've seen all series, just the best play in general. But David Perron takes a penalty, and that is just a momentum killer. You can't do that with Nashville, and they make them pay for it. 19-21 into the second period. Nashville's second goal in the last minute of a period, which is just take all the momentum and just shove it in my mouth. So Nashville on the power play, and it's Shea Weber. This time Shea Weber does get the better of John Gibson. It took him 3 attempts. There was 3 straight attempts, in fact, on this power play. Third time's the charm for a big slapper from the point. Well, not quite from the point. He was in a little bit deeper. He was almost in the top of the face-off circle. But the third time's the charm. Weber's slap shot finds its way home, again from Josi and Forsberg, and now Nashville has themselves a 3-1 lead. Just prior to taking that 3-1 lead, I noticed that Bruce Boudreau had moved Rickard Rakell onto the Getzlaf-Perry line, I guess trying to jumpstart them offensively. A good move as far as I'm concerned. I think I might have taken a guy like Cogliano maybe. Now I know him and Getzlaf both play center, but I'm sure if you put Cogliano over on one of the wings, just based on how he was playing in that game. But Rickard Rakell, again, had those couple of really good chances in the first. He was out there and he was playing well all night, so they move Rakell onto that line, trying to jumpstart them offensively. At this point, Anaheim is throwing everything on net, including the kitchen sink. Jakob Silfverberg takes a stupid penalty, takes another penalty, and basically Nashville's in full-on protect mode at this point. So really, there was no aggression to their power play whatsoever. They just wanted that 2 minutes off the clock. That I can understand. John Gibson does still have to make several key saves to keep this thing close, but again, basically, the Preds are in full-on protect. 17-18 into the third period. The time is winding down. Anaheim gets on the board again. It's a 1-goal game. It's Thompson from Silfverberg and Cogliano. A nice little deflection, a bit of a lucky bounce for Thompson, but it gets in. 17-18. We got almost 3 full minutes in the third period. This is a 1-goal game again. We're coming down to an exciting finish. The Ducks pull Gibson with 1 minute and 25 left. And even 6-on-5, they really get no push whatsoever. Nashville holds on. They win this game 3-2. I shouldn't even say holds on because, again, Anaheim got 0 push 6-on-5. Nashville wins the game 3-2. Nashville beating Anaheim both games on Anaheim's home ice. That was one of the hardest buildings to win in last season. And Nashville's come out and they've done it. As a matter of fact, if you would have told me at the beginning of the playoffs that both San Jose and Nashville would take the first 2 games of their respective series in Los Angeles and Anaheim, I probably would have had you arrested, because clearly you're selling drugs. But here we are. Gotta love hockey. Okay, folks, let's tee up our action tonight. We only have 3 games on the slate tonight, which is good. Maybe I might actually get some sleep this evening. Our first game is Washington heading into Philadelphia with a 2-0 series lead to take on the Flyers. This game gets underway at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It's available on CBC in Canada and the NBC Sports Network in the United States. Braden Holtby versus Steve Mason is going to be your goaltending matchup one more time, despite Mason giving up what people are calling the worst goal of all time. I think that's more than a little hyperbolic, but whatever. John Carlson is a player that I have been watching this whole series and will continue to be. He is really flexing his offensive muscle out there. He leads all defensemen in these playoffs in goals and points. Carlson is really one of the wheels that is making this Washington offense go. He's the guy to watch on Washington's side. Also, the Capitals special teams. That has been a big edge for them in this series. They're really making a statement. They have the top power play in these playoffs at 37.5%, and their penalty kill has been perfect. I think Philly comes out on home ice here and has themselves a heck of a game. They need one in order to stay in this series. I still like the Capitals. I think Washington gets it done again tonight to take a commanding 3-0 lead in this series. I like Washington to win this thing 4-3. Let's head a little further north now to Minnesota, where the Dallas Stars are in Minnesota to take on the Wild with, again, a 2-0 series lead. This game gets underway at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It's available on Sportsnet in Canada, as well as Fox Sports and CNBC in the United States. Your likely goaltending matchup is going to be the same as it's been all series. Kari Lehtonen taking on Devan Dubnyk. Noteworthy for me, the Dallas Stars are the number 2 face-off team so far in these playoffs, winning just under 57% of their face-offs. And, I mean, again, face-offs are one of the most probably underrated to most, especially casual fans, but one of the most vital stats that you can possibly have in the span of a hockey game or a hockey series. If you're winning those face-offs, you're controlling that puck. If you're controlling that puck, you're dictating what's happening in the game. So just under 57%, excellent percentage there for those Stars centers. I mean, quite frankly, like the Wild have no weapons in this series. 9 of the Wild's 19 skaters have less than 2 shots. Let that sink in for a second. Almost half of the skaters on your team have not registered 2 shots. It's either been 1 shot in 2 games or no shots in 2 games. The Wild have made this very easy for Kari Lehtonen. And Kari Lehtonen is a goaltender where if you put pressure on him, he has broken, and we've seen him break. I mean, if we're being perfectly honest, Michael Granlund is the only weapon that the Wild have right now. He's playing great. He's the only one of those players that have shown up. I mean, a guy like Mikko Koivu has done absolutely nothing despite being the team's leading scorer. So Granlund really has been the only forward offensively that has shown up for the Wild. I think that trend continues into Game 3 here. Minnesota, of course, going to be bolstered just a little bit by being at home. I still like Dallas in this game. I'm going to give it to Dallas 3-2 to take a 3-0 stranglehold on this series. In our third and final game of the evening sees the Los Angeles Kings now travel to San Jose down 2-0 after losing both games on home ice to take on the Sharks in the Shark Tank. This game begins at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It's available on CBC in Canada as well as NBCSN in the United States. Your likely goaltending matchup, Jonathan Quick taking on Martin Jones, and that's what I want to focus on talking about this game kind of right at the beginning here. Martin Jones has outplayed Jonathan Quick, and it's not close. Martin Jones has played really, really well. Jones with a .922 save percentage, a 2 goals against average, and you take a look at Jonathan Quick, he's got some of the worst numbers in these playoffs. Like, what is going on? An .870 save percentage? I feel like Jonathan Quick could put up an .885, .890 in his sleep. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's an injury thing, if it's in his head, or maybe the Sharks are just that good this year. Maybe this is finally the year that they have gotten over the hump. But Quick with an .870 save percentage and a 3.08 goals against average. Holy cow. Like that's not going to get it done in the AHL, much less the NHL, much less the NHL playoffs. So Martin Jones, tip of the hat to him, because he has absolutely outplayed and outclassed, really, one of the best goaltenders in the world. The Kings in this series are doing a lot of things right. You watch the games, they're doing a lot of things right. But I think the Kings' biggest problem right now is that their best players have not been their best players. You look at a guy like Drew Doughty. Drew Doughty did not record a point in those first 2 games, and he's a -3. He's your top defenseman. No points and a -3, that's not going to get it done. Tyler Toffoli, a guy that came into the playoffs with actually quite a bit of fanfare. No points, -3. Anze Kopitar, 1 point and 1 shot. The Kings' best players are not being their best players right now. And if they want to have any chance to come back in this series, their best players need to be their best players. I think that's what's going to happen tonight. The Kings have their backs against the wall. and this is not a team that is going to go softly into the night. I like the Kings to win tonight. Maybe this ends up being a road series. Who knows? I like the Kings 3-1 to beat San Jose in Game 3 with their backs against the wall. I think Jonathan Quick plays lights out. I would probably consider saying Kopitar probably has 2 points, maybe 3, maybe the game-winning goal. Kopitar needs to show up in this game. I think he does. I think Quick shows up. I think the Kings win it. I'm going to give it to Los Angeles 3-1. All right, folks, that is going to do it for the Monday, April 18th edition of the Bridgewater's Finest 2016 NHL Playoffs podcast. Let me know in the comments section below, what was your favorite game from last night? Let me know what your picks are for the games tonight. What do you think about Nashville and San Jose? I mean, have they played really... Is it that they've played so well? Is it that the home teams in those first 2 games have played so poorly? Is it a little bit of both? Who's impressed you the most so far out of those series, or really out of any series? Who has been the most disappointing player to you? Let me know. Flood that comment section. Let me know your thoughts so far on these playoffs. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. This episode is in the books. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you again tomorrow.